expecting? How many people are expecting?
So far, about 40 odd have joined, and we're expecting many more. So, but I think it's time. So let's start, Eklavya.
All right. Good evening, everyone, and thank you all for joining us in today's edition of Between the Lines. So, while most of you have attended our earlier session, so you would be well aware of the format, which is now into its 58th edition, if I'm not mistaken. So, this is the 58th monthly session that we are convening of Between the Lines. And for our regular attendees, this is going to be a bit different from the other sessions. Normally, what we do is we pick up a recently published management bestseller, and then we present a brief summary of the same, which is followed by a panel discussion on the insights that are emanating from the theme that we've chosen for the month. Uh, this time, we are doing away with the book because we fortunately got somebody who can, in the next 30 minutes, give us more wisdom than a 300 odd page book would be able to provide. So we are very, very fortunate and honored to have Dr. Abhay Jere with us today. So we have gladly sacrificed that part of the program, and Advait would be interviewing him for the next half an hour, post which we will go back to our the panel discussion on the topic of innovation and incubation, where again we've got stalwarts from the innovation ecosystem like Vaiti and Vijay Talere, who would be sharing their own personal experiences. And I'm sure that's going to be an enlightening discussion. So yeah, we are in for a treat over the next 1.5 hours. And we could not have asked for a better group of individuals today to come and share their own stories, their own experiences, and leave us with some important thoughts that each of us can take back into our organizations and into our own ventures, big or small or otherwise. So on that note, we'll just kick off. And yeah, to start off, of course, since we have Dr. Abhay Jere, let me just quickly introduce him, although again, if I have to just introduce him with all of his achievements, I think that will again take up the better part of the next 5-10 minutes. So I'll keep it really short and simple. He is the Chief Innovation Officer for the Ministry of Education in the Government of India. And as the CIO, he has been instrumental in conceptualizing and implementing and driving some of the most notable, noteworthy innovation-centric initiatives that the government is propagating right now, especially in the education space. So whether it is things like the Atal Innovation Ranking Framework or the innovation councils, which he has institutionalized across thousands of institutes across the country. He's been the singular driving force behind these path-breaking initiatives, which is really sort of spurring the growth of innovation in our country. Uh, and among many other achievements to his credit, he's also the driving force behind what is now the world's largest open innovation model, the Smart India Hackathon. It attracts lakhs of students, thousands of institutions and industries across the world. And that has become one of the signature initiatives that Dr. Abhay Jere has been recognized for. And like one of the other things that we will definitely be touching upon in terms of asking him about is the National Innovation and Startup Policy for faculty and students, which he has also been instrumental in implementing as part of the ministry. And that is something which gives a platform and enables students to start up their ventures right from their formative years itself while they're still in the educational corridors. And if at all there was any doubt about whether he's been a ministry man all his life, he comes with a wealth of corporate experience also. And he was, for those of us in Pune, it gives us a lot of pleasure, one of our homegrown companies. He was the chief scientist for life sciences and the R&D head for Persistent Systems. So thank you so much, Dr. Abhay Jere, for taking out time from your extremely busy schedule. It's not often that we can say, a lot of times we like to say that, yeah, we have a busy day, but the way you've described your last 1 hour and the next 1 hour right now, I think we'll just get into it. And before you get whisked away again into some other dais podium kind of an event. Thank you so much, Dr. Abhay, and over to Advait.
Thanks, Eklavya, and Dr. Abhay Jere, welcome to Between the Lines. In my whatever little consulting experience I have, very few organizations actually, many organizations have CIO, but that I typically stands for information or a kind of thing. Very few organizations have a CIO which says Chief Innovation Officer, and here we have you, which is a Chief Innovation Officer, not for any corporate, but for Ministry of Education, erstwhile Ministry of HRD in the Government of India. So maybe curiosity takes over me, and let me ask you, what exactly is the Chief Innovation Officer doing in the Government of India, if I can ask that question?
First, Advait, thanks a lot for inviting me here. I really appreciate the work which you people are doing within Pune. Am I audible?
Yeah, clear.
Yeah. So really great work propagating culture of reading within our society, because many of our youngsters, which I see, including my kid, are more they are mobile, because they are digitally native.
Yeah.
They're hung up to their mobiles and they really are not at all interested in reading. So in this age, you are trying to promote all this book reading culture. It's a very good,
Thank you so much.
Appreciable job, or very appreciable initiative which you people have undertaken. Regarding the CIO position, the question which you asked, to be honest, I would say I was just lucky to be here. What happened was that I was driving this Smart India Hackathon initiative while I was in Persistent itself,
Okay.
but the ministry. So for 2 years, I was not working for Persistent Systems for 2015 to 2017. I was actually doing the Smart India Hackathon, but Persistent was, I was not at all having any deliverables related to Persistent. And the way this entire initiative got picked up, because Prime Minister appreciated this initiative, and then Prime Minister started using this initiative as a diplomatic tool.
Okay.
So he wanted to do hackathons with international countries, in the other countries. So he went ahead in Singapore and said that India and Singapore should do it a hackathon. And he went to ASEAN countries and started saying that India and ASEAN countries should start doing hackathons. And and when those countries accepted his proposal, I was the person who had to execute that.
Okay.
So because it started with hackathons and innovations, so ministry felt that let's create an innovation cell within the ministry. And then if somebody has to lead an innovation cell, what should be his designation? Other than conventional director general or something of that sort, ministry felt that let's have the designation as Chief Innovation Officer. Unfortunately, at that time when I was doing all these things, our HRD minister at that time, means now Ministry of Education, was Shri Prakash Javadekar ji.
Yeah.
And because I am from Pune, he's from Pune, he also felt that this is the right guy to head, and because I was executing, he has seen me executing 2-3 hackathons by himself, and he was part of India-Singapore hackathon, which I executed. So he felt that now it's a time that we should create such a position. We should get him. But I was not ready to leave my job, because coming to government on contract is not a very good idea in a sense, because they don't pay you well. You hardly get any facilities. So so Prakash Javadekar ji spoke to Anand Deshpande. who is the founder of Persistent Systems,
Yes, of
and
course.
requested him that can we get Abhay on secondment from Persistent Systems. So I am still with Persistent Systems, but on secondment, on loan from Persistent Systems to Government of India. Again, this is another innovation which ministry did to get me on board.
Yeah,
So
lovely.
now for last 3 years, I am Chief Innovation Officer for Ministry of Education. And recently my tenure got extended
Okay.
till March 2023.
Okay, lovely, lovely. And as CIO, one of the things, of course, you mentioned, and the genesis of that was the hackathons. But quite frankly, for a non-techie like me, other than hackathon, which means you need to do some coding or something which I don't do, or many of us perhaps won't do. What are the non-techie kind of innovations that the MHRD or MEI, should I say, under your aegis kind of
So
sort of promote?
So we are doing multiple initiatives. So a hackathon was just one of starting point for this entire cell. But when this cell actually started, then we got into very systematic thinking of what interventions we should do or at which level we should do so that a sustainable innovation ecosystem can get established across our educational institutes. So if you see our education system, and we all are aware, it's mostly based on rote learning. It's a swallow and vomit kind of an education system.
Okay.
Now you see the new education policy is trying to get rid of that system,
Yeah.
but it's going to take some time. So when ministry was working on new education policy internally, they were preparing drafts. The multiple meetings were happening. I was part of some of those meetings, and it was felt at that time itself that why wait for announcement of new education policy? If you have to promote innovation, if you have to promote entrepreneurship, if you have to promote startup kind of an activity, then let's institute a cell and let's start working on it. So your education policy got announced last year, but our cell was formed about 3 years back. Okay, so when we got into this cell, when the team was created, or when we as a team joined this cell, we started thinking about what kind of interventions we will require. So some interventions were required at policy level. Okay, some interventions were required at hand-holding level. Okay, then some interventions were required for creating more and more national platforms, so that large number of talented students can showcase their talent, and then training of teachers was another important component. And when we are looking at all these 4 or 5 pillars, then how we are going to even assess the impact of our innovation or intervention, sorry. So we started working on these 5 pillars, those 4 vertical pillars, and fifth is we may not call it a pillar, but a horizontal kind of a thing. And then we started designing our initiatives accordingly. So from a policy perspective, we got the first policy framework out last year or 2019. Which is called as National Innovation and Startup Policy for Faculty and Students. So there was no guiding policy for faculties and for students if they want to do their startups. For example, what should be the revenue sharing model? What should be the equity sharing model? Because they are working for an institute. So many times it happens that institute go ahead and does arm twisting, and when I looked at some of the revenue sharing models of some of the really premier institutions, they were really not very good, and in some cases they were atrocious also.
So good from the startup.
For example, they used to ask for revenue sharing as high as 50%, 60%.
Oh, okay.
So अगर 60% इंस्टीट्यूट निकाल लेगा, 30% इनकम टैक्स निकाल लेगा, तो फिर बचता क्या है? So there was no incentive for faculties to actually go ahead and do that. So we felt that this needs to change, and so we got that policy. So we made those recommendations. Then IP sharing, I will share with you a very interesting case. I happened to meet a student, again in a very premier institution, and he started building his enterprise in his hostel. He built some e-commerce platform, and he was doing some small business, and he earned few thousand rupees, not even lakh rupees, few thousand rupees. When the director of that institute came to know that such a such student has started some business and has started earning some money out of it, called that student and said, "Where is institute share?" The student said, "Why should I give share to the institute?" So he said, "You are using institution facilities here." So he said, "No, I'm not using any institution. I'm not using any laboratories. I'm not doing anything." Director said, "You're wrong. Because you are using institute's internet, the entire IP of your business belongs to us.
Okay.
That's the reason you have to give us the revenue share. We need to have the revenue share." So we felt that this is not good. We have to change this, and many other
Sure.
things were there.
Very interesting.
So one of the pillar is policy intervention. Second is handholding of the institutions. If you talk to large number of vice chancellors, directors, deans, when they are sitting on dais, they will talk about innovation, entrepreneurship, because these have become buzzwords. So everyone wants to use them. But if you talk to them in private and ask them what you are doing actually, tell me, then they will give you some reply which is not very convincing. And sometimes they are not doing anything because they don't know what to do.
Yeah.
It's not that they are not well-meaning people. They are well-meaning people. They want to do.
Yeah.
But many times these leaders come from a very different background. Some person becomes vice chancellor who is from philosophy background or psychology background or pure sciences background, or from commerce background. And if you ask them now, go and do innovation, suddenly once he becomes vice chancellor or dean or director, you ask him to do innovation and entrepreneurship, he suddenly gets lost and he doesn't know what to do. So we said we have to have systematic programs or schemes to handle these institutions. So we came up with this IIC scheme, Institution Innovation Council. And we have now established these councils in about 2,500 plus institutions. And I'm very happy to share with you all is that through these IICs which we have established, till date in last 2.5 years, we have done more than 28,000 programs related to innovation and entrepreneurship, involving about 30-35 lakh students and faculty members. Program number is unique. 35 lakh faculty member, that number is not unique here. The reason is one student can actually participate, or one faculty can participate in multiple programs, But that is kind of an impact which we have created.
These are huge numbers.
Other initiatives, hackathons, then Atal ranking of institutions we have started to systematically rank all educational institutes on their innovation abilities, innovation index, Because when we started this ranking, even IISc Bangalore, IIT never had any data. When we asked them how many startups actually were there from your students, they didn't have that data. What kind of revenue generation happened? They didn't have that data. So we started and now it's in third year. Now we are getting huge amount of data from all these premier and even non-premier institutions. So multiple interventions, Kapila for IP filing, and I can talk for an hour.
No, I know. No, it's a fantastic work at the government kind of thing, and not many people are aware that government is sort of not just enabling but actually conducting many of these programs. And it's very interesting you mentioned some of these things because one of our supporters for this program today is TiE Pune. I'm a TiE Pune member, and a lot of TiE Pune members are there. And we have been working with the SPPU and the CIIL and the RPF Research Park Foundation on mentoring student kind of entrepreneurs. And very frankly, initially we thought that entrepreneurship and startups will come only from engineering or management backgrounds, but we were very surprised. And like you mentioned, they could come from psychology, they can come from philosophy, physics, any kind of background. So it's a fantastic kind of thing. One of the things that you mentioned, and innovation is a buzzword, everybody wants to talk about it. Even our startup founders, who many of them have joined the call today, everybody thinks that they've come out with this great idea and they're God's gift to mankind, and they're the only people who have this idea. So, as a CIO from the government of India, what's your own definition of how should we look at innovation? And again, I'm going back to what you said in terms of the ranking that you mentioned. So, what are the parameters that you would sort of prescribe for any founders, any entrepreneurs to sort of evaluate or do a self-evaluation of their own innovation?
This is a very loaded question. So if you ask me, what is the definition of innovation or what innovation means to me? So I have a very clear-cut definition when it comes to me, at least.
Mhm.
And many people, so for me, if I have to define research and if I have to define innovation, I define it in a very simple terms. For me, research is conversion of wealth into knowledge.
Mhm.
And innovation is conversion of knowledge into wealth.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I keep my definitions very, very simple. And it's easy to convey also, rather than giving a complicated definition.
Innovation is conversion of knowledge to wealth. Wow, that's as crisp as it can get.
Yeah. So that's the way I define it.
Sure.
At least. I don't know whether I'm right or wrong, but many people will object to it also. But that's the way I do it. Regarding the $1 million innovation or $1 million idea or a gift to mankind, yeah, I go through a lot of such experiences on almost daily basis. Okay.
I can imagine, yeah.
And many people feel that we are insensitive towards their ideas. But what I have learned in last 2 or 3 years, or over a period of time, because I am working in this innovation ecosystem since 2013.
Mhm.
So I started in 11, but ideally I got into it since 2013, 12, 13. When I organized actually the first inclusive innovation conclave in Pune. It is still the biggest event even Sakal has organized till date. So Sakal and me actually went ahead and organized that even inclusive innovation to 2013. And about 1.5 lakh people were there. The queue outside the venue was more than a kilometer long. Okay. So,
Wow.
Coming to this $1 million thing, what has happened over a period of time, because of multiple forums wants to get associated with this innovation buzzword, they try to identify innovators, and even if the idea is not so great or in some cases even shitty, okay, they go ahead and celebrate those ideas, clap those ideas, give some token of appreciation, give some prizes to them. Because of this, the innovator thinks that the idea which he has got or which he is presenting is really great. And now it is going to change his fortune. Okay. So for last 2 or 3 years, I have stopped clapping for shitty ideas.
Okay.
And I will request all the forums through this that they should stop doing that, because knowingly, unknowingly, they are doing huge amount of disservice by doing it. Because many times when we want to clap for an idea, we believe that we are encouraging a person to go ahead and do. But because of that false encouragement, many people start pursuing a shitty idea for years, and eventually the time they realize that their ideas are not so great and they're not commercializable, it doesn't have future, they have wasted 2 or 3 years of their life, or even 5 to 10 years of their life. I have met few innovators who have actually wasted 8 to 10 years of their life.
Oh, okay.
Chasing a not so great idea, because they were celebrated at 3 or 4 forums and people made them believe that what they are talking or what they are presenting is really very great. So that is one aspect of it. Second aspect is person who is having a good idea. He doesn't know how to how to actually do valuation of that idea. You know, many
Valuation
of them
directly or even validate perhaps.
innovators are innovators. They are not businessmen, so they cannot go ahead. They cannot do a business plan around it. They cannot actually do market research around it. And because someone tells them that it is a great idea and they can become millionaires or billionaires based on that idea, they start believing it. Okay, so many times I will request majority of the innovators to actually join hands with the right kind of people who will help them evaluate their idea from a valuation perspective.
Sure.
Yeah? And third thing, which is again very, very critical, is that it's okay to fail and it's okay that your idea is not good. Just drop it and move forward and start thinking on a better idea. Many times what happens in India, failure is not worn as a badge of honor, like in Israel. In Israel, if you go, there many times failure is also worn as a badge of honor. So many people continue pursuing an idea just because they feel that if they drop it, they will be treated as failures. You know. So to avoid that failure attack, they end up pursuing it. But we need to tell these innovators, these young startup people, that it's okay. Go ahead, accept the failure, move forward, come up with a better idea, come up with a better plan. Because even when you are going through the failure, you have learned a lot in that process. And when you will start working on a new idea, you will be far better equipped.
Yeah.
And here I will actually like to request you, because you run multiple such forums. I will like to request all the listeners to look at a forum called as, in Israel, it's an Israeli forum. Sorry for quoting it, but it's a name of the forum. It's a bit an awkward name, but forum is called as Fucked Up Nights.
Okay.
It's an Israeli forum, and it's extremely well attended forum, and it's for startups, you know.
Okay.
And during that Fucked Up Night session, what they do is that they call a failure.
Oh, okay.
Startup or a person who has failed, and he talks about the reasons why he failed, where he messed it up, and that is the reason they call it as Fucked Up Nights.
Okay.
And because large number of people learn from the mistakes which that person is talking about.
Absolutely.
Don't do these, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. Here I messed it up, here I messed it up, and because of that. And many times when I listen to some of these talks, I believe that these kind of interactions are much more important than bringing someone who is successful to talk. Because if a person, if you bring a successful person to talk, and if you ask him why he is successful, he will try to give you a genuine answer, but that may not be the right answer. Sometimes you are just successful because you are just lucky, like me. I'm just lucky I'm here. Okay. Sometimes you are at right place at right time. Sometimes the market is ready. Sometimes you have a customer, you know, or it could be combinations of factors. So a person who is successful, he tries to comprehend that what might be the reason. And he tries to answer that question, but it may not be the real good answer. You know, it may not be the right answer. But if you ask a person who has failed that why he has failed, he will give you a real answer. Yeah, मैं lazy था, या मैंने market research नहीं किया, yeah, I messed up with my finances. You know, kind of thing. And he will go in details and where he messed up, how he messed up, kind of a thing. So there will be a lot of learning experience for others can learn a lot.
Absolutely.
That is what I know. I have talked a lot on this question.
No. These are pearls of wisdom for us. So great. One more thing. How much time we can steal from you?
I think we can wind up in next 5 minutes or 10 minutes.
Okay.
Because I have to go again for that program, which is
yes. I know. You told me that. One thing, maybe just two quick questions from my side in those 5 minutes. everybody thinks that the innovation that we've been talking about comes only in terms of product or service, but I'm sure there is so much innovation one can try for beyond your product or service. So are there any specific examples that you can share where there'll be some inspiration for? There are many, like I said, many startup founders here where innovation need not be only for product or service that they have to offer.
So there are large number of process innovations which are happening.
Yeah.
When you say services could be, see, either it will be a product or it will be services or it could be a process, that
Yeah.
kind of.
Yeah.
So there are multiple innovations happening in every sector.
Yeah.
UPI, if you say, is one of the biggest process innovation. BHIM, BHIM
Yeah.
UPI. I
Yes,
think
of
it is the innovation from India which has ability to actually create a global impact and wipe out all these credit card and debit card companies.
True.
And it's an Indian innovation.
Yeah.
UPI.
Absolutely.
So we should
Absolutely.
be really proud of it.
Sure.
Right? Not Paytm. I'm talking about UPI.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So it's at the end of the day, it's a process innovation. It's not a product innovation.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
When it comes to product innovations, there are again multiple innovations from agriculture sector to pharma sector. So vaccines, what we have done in this corona.
Sure.
I know Dr. Krishna Ella very well, chairman and founder for Bharat Biotech.
Yeah.
So the kind of work he is doing in area of vaccines is really very great. I used to work for Serum Institute myself for a couple of years before actually venturing into persistent and other this area education.
Sure.
I used to work with Serum Institute also. So there are a lot of innovations are happening, and within even Serum Institute, if you really look at the kind of process innovation happened to ensure that vaccine stability is high, sterility is not an issue, extremely small steps which were taken there.
Sure.
Was really great, in a sense.
Absolutely.
So, see, innovation can happen at any level. The only thing is that what we really need to tell our youngsters is that try identify a problem, look at it very empathetically. Empathy is a very, very key factor in that. So design thinking and all those aspects should get into it. And then really identify where the shoe pinches. And try to solve that problem. And there will be market for it.
Sure. Excellent. One last question before you go. Going back to your higher education kind of role in the Ministry of Education, there are many practicing entrepreneurs here, startup founders here, and here you are as a ministry coming out with an MBA on innovation and entrepreneurship. So can one really formally learn, whether it's MBA or any other program, innovation and entrepreneurship in a theory course? I mean, how should one go about
it? Very interesting question and very nice question you have asked. I will tell you why we started that program. No such program exists anywhere. It's an incubator-based program. Again, it's an innovative program. Okay, it's not a classroom-based program. It's an incubator-based program. The classroom component is only 30% of it. 70% is incubator-based program. The reason we started this program was that we came across multiple youngsters who were keen on pursuing their idea, who wanted to get into entrepreneurship. But their parents, their spouses, their relatives, or their partners, girlfriend, boyfriends were not allowing them to do that.
Okay.
So they used to tell those youngsters that why you want to get into this rigmarole of doing a startup, working 48 hours a day, and actually messing up with this great young life where you can go out and enjoy, So it's better you take a job in some big corporate, work from maybe even not 9 to 5 because we work more now, 8 to 8 at night. But at least you will have your Saturday, Sunday for you. When you are doing your entrepreneurship, you simply don't have any holidays for years, right?
True.
So when we met the students, they said, sir, can you do something for us? So we were internally discussing what we can do for them. So we conceptualized this MBA program. Okay. So we told students that if you want to do entrepreneurship, you can join this program in a batch. Okay. Batch of 2 or 3. You will get incubated. For others, for the outside world, you can tell, or your parents can tell, that my son is or my daughter is doing MBA. But under that garb of that MBA program, you will be actually pursuing your own idea and pursuing your own entrepreneurship and take it forward. You will work on your concept for 2 years. We will give you all the mentoring which is required. And if you eventually emerge a successful entrepreneur, or if you see that, yes, your business is moving forward, then the society, your parents, in 2 years, their mindset get adjusted and they accept that you are going to become an entrepreneur and you are going to be successful. If you're not successful, at least because you have worked on your good idea, you have taken it forward, you become a better entrepreneur. And already a large number of companies want entrepreneurs.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sure.
So we said that, okay, let's try this program. So we have not given approval to that program to all the colleges. We initially started with only 4 colleges. Out of those 4 colleges, they were also struggling to find students because we want students who want to get into entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
But I'm happy to share with you that about 30 to 33 startups have got registered from this program, because every college was giving admissions to about 20-25 students. So on an average, 20-25 students were there. So out of 80 students, eventually, and there was a group, so 2 people, 3 people group. So about 33 startups have registered. So now we are given approval this year to about 15 more institutions. So we will have about 15-16 institutions together running this program. We are not giving approval to all the MBA colleges because primary requirement is an incubator. If you have an incubator, then only we will able to give the approval. So this is what we are trying to do. Again, we are trying to experiment here. Let's see.
Sure. Great. I know you've already stretched your time for us. So thank you so much, Abhay. And just 2 things take away, what you mentioned, and it just sort of segues into our next part of our program. You mentioned about failures and encouraging failures, and we have Vaitishwaran. He's already joined, and I'm going to talk to him as well. Everybody knows him for his book, Failing to Succeed, and fail fast and that kind of thing. So we will get into that part of it.
Fail fast.
Yes, of course. And we have Vijay, who's the CEO of Bhav Institute, COEP's Bhav Institute, who's an incubator, and I'm sure he's taking notes in terms of the MBA program with the incubation. So failing is not a bad option, and importance of incubation, that's what you've touched upon. And that's how we will sort of get into our next part of our program. So thank you, Dr. Abhay Jairy. Thanks once again for fitting us into our program. And wonderful to have you here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me. Really appreciate for giving me.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Bye-bye. Yeah. So like I mentioned, welcome Vaithi to the program. I know you just joined a little bit late. And it gives me great pleasure to introduce our first panelist, K. Vaithishwaran, or Vaithi as he's more popularly known. And much more popularly known, he's known as the father of e-com industry in India. All of us are well used to e-com and buying things on Amazon and Flipkart and so on and so forth. But many people may not know that he was the first one to actually start this kind of e-commerce company nearly 20 years ago. FabMart was 1999. It was India's first pure play retail online company. And of course, then, perhaps it was ahead of its curve in terms of the maturity of the Indian market. And he wrote a book on his experience, and he'll talk about that as well in terms of failing to succeed. Now, of course, he's become a serial entrepreneur, and now he's the co-founder and the head of another startup that he started in the health segment, health food segment rather, called Again Drinks. Welcome, Vaiti. He, of course, shares his experience with students of IITs and IIMs, and we are lucky to have him here today, share his experience with us. So thanks, Vaiti, for joining us, and
Thanks, Advait.
welcome.
Thanks for
Welcome.
inviting
Thank
me
you so
and
much.
looking forward.
Yes, indeed. Joining Vaiti is Vijay Tadele. He is the CEO of COAP's Bhau Institute of Innovation, Entrepreneurship and Leadership. What Abhay Jere mentioned as incubation. So this is one of the leading incubators in the country. And in the last nearly just under 4 years, they've done huge kind of progress in terms of what they're working for the startup community in and around Pune. They have about close to 140 startups, and at least 100 of them are actually virtual incubators, and maybe 30 of them, maybe more. We'll get those numbers from Vijay. Actually physically co-located in the campus of Bhau. Before joining Bhau Institute's incubator, Vijay has spent close to 3 decades in variety of IT companies, including TCS and Kari Consultants. Of course, he comes with a huge pedigree in terms of education, both from VJTI as well as IIT Bombay. So thanks, Vijay, for joining in, and welcome to Between the Lines.
Thank you, Adit. Thank you for inviting me.
Incidentally, I have to mention that Vijay has been a great supporter of Between the Lines program ever since it started 4 years ago. We've done several programs, close to perhaps 20 programs in the good old physical world, in the fantastic auditorium that Bhau offers to us. And it's always been a great experience at Bhau. So thanks,
Thank you.
Vijay, for that as well.
Thank you.
Vaiti and Vijay, if you could sort of switch on your cameras, I can't see you.
Yeah, I have switched on my camera.
Okay. So Vaiti, maybe I'll start with you, because something that Abhay mentioned in terms of, it's okay to fail. And, you had a fantastic startup way back 20 years ago, and things didn't go as well as perhaps you had planned at that point in time. So for people who are not so sure, because perhaps they are just about 20 or 20 plus year old in life, can you take us through your quickly in terms of your own experience of your first startup and the story of its failure?
Yeah, sure, Advait. Like I said, first, thanks for having me here. You asked a question where the answer to that will actually take 200 pages of the book, but I'll try and give it to you in a couple of minutes.
Sure.
And somebody wants details, they should really pick up the book where all the details are there. Essentially, in 99, India was still having 20,000 people shopping online, and all of them were buying from Amazon.com. In the US, less than 3 million people used the internet, and all the internet were dial-up on modems. There were no smartphones, there was no Wi-Fi, and it was a totally different world. And most of the customers were very suspicious of shopkeepers, physical ones. So when you launch something online and tell people to come and buy, we're really trying to change habits. And what we have all seen is that it takes over a decade for our habits to change.
Yeah.
So that was a challenge that we faced. The bigger challenge that we faced as an experience is there was no e-commerce site in India. There was no payment gateway in India. There were no merchandisers in India. There was no data upload system in India, nothing. Everything that today is understood as standard in the e-commerce industry did not exist.
Mm-hmm.
So most people who attend sessions like this know that we started India's first e-commerce company. What they don't know is that we also set up India's first payment gateway along with Citibank. Nobody knows that. We also innovated and started India's first online cash on delivery system. We started India's first online grocery system. So everything, the first data upload system, the first e-commerce site built in India for an Indian company was all done by us. So they were true innovations in that side, but like you said, it's way ahead of its time. Sure. And I think the challenge that we faced over this, and I'm not going to get into too much of detail, essentially what happened is, one good thing happened out of it is 4 years later, when we realized this business is going to take longer and we were stuck with inventory, we started selling some of the grocery stocks that we bought. We opened a physical store and started selling offline just to get rid of inventory. And that is one of the key things about an entrepreneur must look is sometimes you'll come across turnings on the path that you don't recognize it. It's important to keep an eye open and take the right decisions. We were doing online business. We were started selling our grocery stock offline because we were not selling online. There was no volumes. And that single store where we sold became so large that we established more stores. And in 4 years, it became the largest supermarket chain in India called Paramount.
Okay.
And with revenues of over 300 crores, and got acquired by the Aditya Birla Group and is today called the More chain of stores.
Yeah.
So in a sense, it was a very unique thing that entrepreneurs must look for. So you start something else can happen. And it's important to keep an eyes and ears open to other things.
Yeah. Sure.
But the base business we continued, and it ended up because we couldn't raise funds after 2013. And then it became a fairly negative. So one of the challenges in India, and I guess you will discuss it as we go along, is that if you fail in India as an entrepreneur, unlike other parts of the world where are actually celebrated, in India, people celebrate successes. But if you fail as an entrepreneur, essentially your dignity gets stripped out of you. And you are left treated as an outcast, and you're treated with zero respect. Nobody wants to talk to you because you're a failure. And in my case, it becomes so personally demeaning that I decided to give up everything, including, the ultimate decision. And life was so difficult for 2 years. But whatever, we've passed all that. And, the good thing is I'm back with another startup. So it's important to have character. But the reality is failures in India, unlike other places, can hit you very hard. And because 97-98% of startups fail, I think one of the things that entrepreneurs need is to have strength of character. That's very important when you start up.
Very interesting. Absolutely. We'll come back to that point, very important point. Vijay, again, Dr. Jere mentioned a lot about incubator and, the incubator-led MBA program. But for the benefit of people who are not fully aware of what is an incubator, and we see a lovely building behind you. So, is that an incubator, or what's your own definition of what an incubator is, and what role does it play in the life of a startup founder?
Sure. Thank you, Advait. Thank you first of all for inviting me on this panel of innovation and incubation and startups. I think a great session by Dr. Abhay Jere also. See, incubator is a kind of a program or an institution to help entrepreneurs to validate their ideas, to build prototypes, and to take them to the market. And these incubators help them to take their ideas to market, basically. Okay, it's kind of a one-stop solution where you get most of the support that you need, whether directly from incubator, through their ecosystem, or through their third-party partners. Okay, so if you summarize, we play a facilitator role for all the startups when they need what they need to take their idea to market.
Sure. And coming back to the point that has been made in terms of, how do you judge success or failure of startups that you incubate?
Yeah. So there are many ways one can define success. Like nowadays, a lot of times people look at success as the one where a startup is able to become a unicorn. That's one of the success factor that a lot of times you get to hear, or a startup has raised a VC funding, a large VC funding. Okay. But I think success in my view will be that a startup is whatever idea he or she has and has been able to make a social impact. Okay. And they have one of the reason why India, the government of India at the central and state level are supporting the startups community, and a lot of programs they have for startups is to ensure that we generate employment in the country. And India having almost 60-70% of the youth population needs to have a job market for all of this youth. And startups are going to play a very key role in that employment generation. And the social impact that they can generate and the transformation that they can bring in society and the
Interesting.
industry as a whole.
Interesting.
So
you're looking at
that's
social,
one, right.
So you're looking at social impact as one important, and employment generation, of course, that has to be a quite an interesting metric. Vaiti, one of the things that you mentioned, I also had mentioned earlier, is that perhaps what you were trying to do 20 years ago was ahead of its curve in terms of the readiness of the market. First e-com, first payment gateway, first COD, first e-grocery kind of thing. So, if I ask you, and I'm sure there will be million others would have asked you the same question, that what are your key takeaways or learnings from that experience, and from a startup founder in today's times in 2021, post-COVID, if I want to add that, how would they know that, are they ahead of the curve? Is it the right time? What kind of experience learning sharing you want to do to advise younger people today who are in their 20s now, perhaps who were born when you did your own thing, and are now in this game of starting up and being an entrepreneur? And mind you, I mean, Vijay did mention about unicorns, but for every 4 or 5 unicorns in a year India has, I'm just talking of India, maybe there are 50,000 startups that happen every year, sorry. So obviously, the like you said, 98-99% is the failure rate. So
Sure. So anyway, on that subject of unicorns, I just want to make a point. I'm still looking forward to a unicorn that makes money. So, the answer to your question as to are we ahead of the curve, behind, the honest answer is nobody knows, right? I mean, if somebody comes and says, I know precisely when to time the market,
yeah,
they are lying, because the reality is nobody knows.
Sure.
And you can either be ahead of the curve, you can be behind the curve, or you can be exactly timing the curve.
Sure.
So the way to treat this is to say, I don't want to worry about it. If I am ready to start, then I will start. And time will tell you whether you were right on time or you were ahead or behind, which is why I've also always felt that a key element for success in a startup, an entrepreneur may do everything right and still fail, right, is good fortune. And good fortune, if you do everything right, obviously, if you do stupid things in your business anyway, it won't succeed. But assuming an entrepreneur does everything right, she may still fail because she didn't have good fortune. And my association of good fortune is that if you are fortunate enough to launch your startup at the right time in the market, then you'll succeed.
Sure.
That's the risk that you take, and you can't find out till you start. Only time will tell you.
Only time will tell. Okay. But time will also perhaps tell that you've not been successful. You've become a failure, like you mentioned, and it's not been taken very nicely in our Indian social kind of context.
Correct.
And today's buzzword is fail fast.
Right.
Having gone through that one cycle many years ago, do you believe in this concept, and how it should, from a young entrepreneur perspective, how should it be taken? What is the real meaning of fail fast?
I have a slightly different view on this, Advait, and you've read the book, so you probably know what I'm leading up to.
Yeah.
The general view, popular opinion, is that you must fail fast, learn quickly and fail fast. My view is slightly different. I think you should certainly learn, but it doesn't mean that you fail fast, because fail fast to me is a cop-out. Essentially, what you're saying is that I will do something, and if it doesn't work in 6 months, I will fail fast and move to something else. Now, while it sounds like a smart idea, it is actually not very smart. In my view, as an entrepreneur, you must do all your thinking before you launch. If you need 6 months, take 12. If you want to meet 50 customers, meet 100.
Yeah.
Ask yourself 150 questions as to what will work, what will not work. Try and build a thesis and everything else. After you've satisfied yourself with all the questions and the answers, then you go launch. After that, you can't say, I will fail fast. Because if your idea is to fail fast, you actually don't need to ask all these questions. You can simply launch and fail fast. So my view is, once you've done all the thinking and launched, you must give it as much time as it requires. It may need 6 months. Some businesses need 2 years. Some businesses 4 years. You must have the mental capacity to fight till the last drop.
Sure.
And beyond which you can't go on any further. and then you can move, but you can't say fail fast. So I have very different view. I think learning is very important. Learn from failure as soon as possible, make course corrections. But
Yeah.
failing fast essentially means you're going in with a plan B. And I am, unlike a corporate business, a CEO where you build a plan A and then a plan B. I think for an entrepreneur, a plan B is actually plan A. Because if you build a plan B, it essentially means you're not sure of plan A.
Yeah.
Right? Obviously, things will change in the market. Multiple will things go around. You keep making corrections.
Yeah.
But you can't have backups. An entrepreneur typically are bootstrapped. I'm not talking of unicorns who raise $1 billion. There you can have plan Z. It doesn't matter. You got enough money to burn.
Yeah.
But a true entrepreneur who's bootstrapped has very limited money and resources. You can't say I have very little money, let me build a plan A and a plan B and a plan C. No, you can't. You have to build plan A, think it hard and do your best.
Sure,
and then continue till as long as you want. That's my view.
Understood. Understood. Yeah, interesting point. I'll come back to on that plan A, B, and Z, like you mentioned. Vijay had lost a connection, but I think he's back. Vijay, can you hear us? Yeah, you're mute, Vijay. If you can unmute yourself.
Yeah. Sorry about it. I lost my connection here.
No, not an issue. Vijay, going back to your role, I mean, I have a question for you that, what should startup founders expect from an incubator, and what in turn is your expectations from them?
Okay. See, basically a startup founder, if you don't mind, I will get back from my laptop, okay?
Because yeah, sure.
Yes. Yeah.
Recording in progress.
Okay. Hello. Yeah.
Yeah, Vijay,
sorry.
can you hear us?
Sorry, is it fine?
Yeah.
A startup founder, basically, when they come to incubator, they have different kind of requirements. Each startup has a different kind of requirement. But to summarize, what they look for in an incubator is basically a mentoring, whether it's a business mentoring or a technical mentoring, to help their idea, validate their idea, to build a prototype, to get the technical support to build their prototype in terms of labs facilities, fab lab, the office space if they require to operate from that incubator, the manufacturing space or prototype development space, different tools that they require to these things. Interns from the campus or other engineering institutes. Then also they require access to funding. And normally most of the incubators, as the incubators, we support very early stage startups. So naturally the VCs are not really interested in funding. In the Indian scenario, there is nothing much support for those who do not have a customer traction or kind of a product ready.
Yeah.
So in that case, what happens is we have to provide them government grants, which are available to early stage startups, and incubator provides that access to them, to those government grants.
Okay.
These most of the startups are looking for all this support and the third party services, whether you're for IP development or IP filing, company formation, accounting, marketing, go-to-market. So all like entire span converting from your idea to market, whatever stage you are in, they require different support, and ecosystem plays a big role in this. The entire ecosystem.
And in turn, would you have any expectations from startups?
We have an expectation from startup is basically when they come up with their ideas, they need to have a thorough thinking, and they should kind of, we help them, we also handle them to understand who is their consumer and who is their customer. Try to do a survey upfront before they jump into their developing their idea into a prototype or go to market. That's one of the area where we find that startup fail, is because they jump into developing the idea without actually validating whether that idea has a potential in the market. We expect the startups to realize that fact that startup or developing a business is not just developing a technology prototype and taking it to the market, but to understand whether really their market exists at that time. And
Sure.
what you mentioned that very rightly is ahead of curve and this thing. Basically, so you
Yeah.
need to be on the right time. And who is your competition? They need to be aware of their competition, or they need to do a survey. They need to do a lot of
Sure.
research.
Understood.
And to be
Understood.
sincere enough to work on that idea.
Yeah, yeah, great, great. Those are great inputs, Vijay. Vaiti, coming to you, and just to continue what Vijay mentioned in terms of incubation and the support and the ecosystem, would things would have been different for you if this ecosystem existed 20 years ago? And what are your advice to young startup founders? How do they take maximum value out of this ecosystem? You mentioned fail fast. You have a different take on it, that you learn from your failures. So how do you actually do that on the ground? Because you still need to fail to learn from failures.
So first is to answer the part about incubators, whether it would have helped us at that time. I'm not sure, to be
Okay.
honest. I think
Okay.
incubators help entrepreneurs who come with a limited experience, are young, fresh out of college, or have 2-3 years experience, don't know how to A, build a product, or B, market the product, or probably a mixture of both. Me and my co-founders, all of us came with at least many years of experience. Okay, so
Yeah,
this was,
yeah.
and I myself came with about 15 years experience, and all my co-founders were similar.
Sure.
So I'm not sure that an incubator at that time would have helped us, people with that kind of a profile, but the
Okay.
incubator certainly play a very important role. There's no question about it. What was the second part of your question? You asked something.
You mentioned about learning from failures, but not fail fast, because you need to think about it with this thing. So how do
Yeah,
you learn
so-
from your failures? Because you need to fail first to learn from your failures.
No, I think failing. So the funny thing about failing is, you think about this like it's a course in a college, right? If you go and want to do a course in a college, success is like a subject. Failure is the full course curriculum, right?
Okay.
So to complete a full course through success, you have to succeed multiple times. But if you fail once, you're actually learning the entire course.
Yeah.
And that's the reason I've always felt as failure will teach you a lot more than success can ever do.
Yeah.
And the reason is very simple. The reason is because we are so drunk on success, we lack the maturity to lean back and ask, why did I succeed? People learn when you ask questions. When we fail, we come at, certainly the person who failed, in this case, somebody like me, I would think and say, why did I fail? But if I succeed, I don't come back and say, why did I succeed? Because then my normal answer is, I succeeded because I'm such a smart guy. I'm such an intelligent guy. I'm such a handsome guy. I'm an IQ. So the answers are already in your mind.
Sure.
You're not removing the layer and asking, why did I really succeed?
Yeah.
So that's the reason I think failure is important, because you're asking yourself questions to learn.
So are you suggesting introspection is more important when you succeed rather than you fail?
100%.
Okay.
I think introspection is equally important when you succeed and when you fail.
Okay.
It is just that people who succeed never introspect, because they know the answer. I'm the smart guy, right? That's why I succeeded.
Yeah.
That may not be the
I've
reason.
the market right, and
you may actually have succeeded simply because you were plain lucky, right? But who wants to say that? No successful man say, look, I succeeded because I am a lucky man. I want to say I'm succeeded because I'm a very smart guy.
Sure. So, in the last 20 years, and now you're a second-time entrepreneur, what has changed of things around you when you are now into entrepreneurship again? You're a startup founder. That time you are 15 years experience. Now you are 35 years experience, kind of thing. So what has changed, in the ecosystem, like Vijay says that. So what has changed for good and what has changed for worse? If you can sort of share your views.
So I must pick up the point that Vijay mentioned. I think the big thing that has changed the ecosystem. Today, it is easier to do a startup socially than it was.
Okay.
Right? Because of people like incubators and other people in the ecosystem, people keep reading about it and they know that there is a support system available. So it's easier to start. Second, because of technological changes, today we can do a lot more with less resources than we could do earlier.
Yeah.
Right. So, for example, today my company, again, drinks. We sold about 150,000 bottles. This quarter we could be doing 50,000 bottles. You'll be surprised to know we are just 7 people in the company.
Oh.
It would be impossible to think of this 20 years back. 20 years back, we needed 50 people to sell 1,000 bottles. Today, 7 people are selling 50,000 bottles, right?
Yeah.
Now it's a smart, so much resources, so much thing is it. That's the second change. So ecosystem has changed, resources have changed, technology has changed. And the most important thing is today, people understand that doing a startup is not something to be looked down upon. And people are encouraging, saying, yeah, he's doing a startup. In fact, in many cases, people look up to people who are starting up, saying, okay, he's an entrepreneur, he's a founder, he's not just working somewhere. It's just that if the founder fails, then they'll get treated differently, but that comes much later. But at the starting point, you're certainly given a lot more respect. So those are things that have changed for better. What has changed for the worse, I think, is that in the last 15 years, we discussed about the metrics of success earlier also. You had asked this question. I think the worst thing that has changed is people now believe that the only way to measure success for a startup is how much money have you raised. And to me, that's the least important thing for a startup, right? Because you could be a startup and succeed without raising money. Or you could be a startup raising a lot more money and never succeeding, at least profitably. You may succeed by doing an IPO or becoming a unicorn. But you may never make money. So I think the metrics of success have been dumbed down, and the people are no longer looking for solid business metrics to measure the success. So if you go back even 30, 40 years back, Infosys was the last, to me, great success, because not only did they build an IPO, they built a profitable company. That's the measure of success. And that, I think, has gone down for the worse. That's the one thing that I would like to change.
Vijay, continuing with the discussion on measures of success, I always have this question for startup founders: that do you want to make money from the business or of the business? As an incubator, what's your view on that? Would you rather have, of your 140 people, most of them becoming unicorns, but like Vaiti mentioned, not many of them or most of them are loss making? Or would you want at least few handful of them to actually be successful in their core business?
Yeah, I think naturally, looking at the success rate of the startups, and everybody can become unicorn. That's also is sure. But my personal opinion on this, or as an incubator, what we would like our startups to be, is what I said as a success criteria that I look at for the startups is whether they are able to take their idea to the market and make a social impact and create that employment, and that way be successful and make, naturally, the entrepreneur has to also make money, and they have to be profitable and those things. So even if they are small, then they don't become unicorns, but as long as they are able to make an impact, they're able to generate employment, and they are able to make be themselves profitable, I think I would treat them as a successful startups. And that is what we are trying to build through BHAU Institute. But eventually this thing is also, we are hopeful that someday we will see some unicorn also.
Great. And from the, based on these metrics, from the so-called successes that you have based on your last 4 years of being an incubator, if you have to sort of draw on, what are the common reasons why some of these have become successful, or if somebody have actually exited and gone back to corporate world, or, as is fashionably called, pivoted into some other business, what could be the reasons for the failures? Have you had a chance to sort of introspect on that?
Yeah. We have quite a good examples of some of them who have been on a journey towards success. I won't say they are successful today. We have graduated startups also who have moved out of BHAU Institute and kind of continuing to take their journey forward. And they are on our criteria of success of startups. They are moving ahead.
Yeah.
On the failure sides, there are failures also where the startups have decided to close. And most of them, I will say, is majority of them who have closed are, we have a different kind of types of incubation. So we do pre-incubation wherein mostly student startups who do not have any idea about business, and they just have they see some problem in the society and they say that I can find the solution for that.
Yeah.
And they come to us and say that, sir, how can I take this forward? So when we start handholding them one-on-one and we tell them to validate their idea, explore the business potential and talk to customers, they realize that that idea is not feasible or viable to take it to the market or take it forward. So that kind of failures are there. There are failures in last 1.5 years. Some of the startups who were in some domains like travel and tourism, and some of them they have kind of
one can understand.
they have kind of decided to they moved to corporate, and they said after 2 years we'll again come back.
Sure.
Because we want to take it forward, but this is not, we are sure that next 2-3 years it's not going to go much ahead.
Absolutely.
So that kind of failures are also there. There are failures. Most of the startups in general, what we have found is some of them who have failed, who have been ready with the product, have not done their groundwork in the sense product market fit, what we say that whether your product meets the market requirements and whether the product has the market potential, or is the customer really has that pain point to take your product. I think if they don't do that groundwork and they don't do that study upfront, they jump into developing their product and they love their idea, they fall in love with their idea and they think that a market will automatically come. I think those are some of the few failures that we have seen.
Absolutely, absolutely. Very important point. Vijay mentioned falling in love with your idea, and one of the most common myths of startup failure is that I didn't get funding, therefore I failed. I think the most important reason is the product market fit that you mentioned. It's not the funding. Funding will happen if the product market fit is right.
Right.
Excellent points. Vaiti, coming back to you where you left, you mentioned a very interesting thing about that. Being a startup founder has become much more socially acceptable. And on a lighter note, sometimes the younger startups actually have experienced that 5 years ago, maybe when they are of marriageable age in the Indian system, they find it difficult, but now increasingly it's okay for them to get married when they are just about starting their startup journey. But that's on a lighter note. What I want to understand from you is that, in spite of all the experiences that you have, and you did mention certain very sensitive things in terms of, being considered outcast, or, losing your dignity, it really tests your character. Now, in spite of all this, what made you become a second-time entrepreneur?
I think becoming an entrepreneur and a founder is addictive, right? It's like a drug.
Okay.
And once you've experienced it, irrespective whether you succeed or fail, you always want to constantly keep looking out for a problem and saying, can I do something to solve it? It's like an inventor. An inventor, there's no inventor in history who has made one invention.
Yeah.
They make several. And it is not that they start by saying, I'm going to invent 10 things. They make one, then they make another one, then they make another one, because the process of inventing for them becomes addictive. Similarly, for an entrepreneur, solving a problem through founding a company or through becoming an entrepreneur is also addictive. So that's the reason.
Okay.
The only thing is, in my case, what I said is, because I'm starting off so late at an age of 57 years old, I said, look, I want to put a couple of conditions before I start. And the two conditions I put in this case is, it must be a product that has never been built before. And it must potentially have something that can socially impact people. And if those two boxes were not ticked, I wasn't. So in a sense, I wasn't interested in doing another e-commerce company or another fintech company. I mean, I had no interest.
Sure.
But here, because it was a product that's never been done, and we discussed innovation earlier before this panel discussion, we've ended up filing patents, and hopefully we'll get it. And it'll make us the only FMCG startup in India to apply for patents and maybe get it. Nobody's even applied. Forget getting it. Nobody's even applied for it.
Okay.
Right? That's true innovation.
Mhm.
Because we created a product that doesn't exist anywhere in the world.
Sure, sure.
So to me, that was very important. That's what got me excited, the chance to do something path breaking.
Mhm.
And second is because it was such a unique product, potentially it could be socially impactful. Those are two
Yeah.
things why I said I'll go back and start again. But I was very clear I was not doing another run-of-the-mill startup that everybody's doing.
Sure, sure. Understood, understood. A couple of questions again to you. Again, going back to this socially acceptable thing. We've been again lucky to get support from National HRD Network and NHRD in Pune for many of our programs the last couple of years. So there are a lot of HR folks as well on this call. And one thing, that if I fail as a startup, like Vijay just mentioned, that especially if I'm in travel tourism last couple of years, at least 2 years, then many of those people have gone back to corporate world. So what's your advice to HR folks? How should they look at these so-called unfortunate failures from entrepreneurship, and how should they get sort of re-enter the corporate world, and what should be the HR's outlook for them? What's your advice to HR, and what's your advice to such people who want to get back to corporate world?
You're asking me,
Yeah.
Okay. So my advice to HR people is that while you mentioned that the entrepreneurs unfortunately failed, the HR people must treat it as a very fortunate thing and grab them, right?
Okay.
I think in the US, in Silicon Valley, if an entrepreneur fails, a lot of corporates chase him or her and try and grab that person before she goes on and does her next startup. Because that person will bring so much of learnings to the table that no successful corporate person will ever know. So my advice is, unfortunately, it doesn't happen. And I think a lot of HR people are to blame because they also go by resumes. Unfortunately, I know there are HR people listening, so hopefully 1% of them will change their mind. Most of them go by resumes. A resume which says, I worked as a sales manager and increased sales by 48% quarter on quarter every quarter. I reduced cost by 300%. I moved the needle on margins by 154%. These are the resumes that come in. And then there'll be a resume saying, I did a startup and the company collapsed and I failed. So it's very difficult for an HR person to apply their mind saying, this is the resume that I want to pick. I also want to add, just this morning, I made an offer to somebody to join us as a head of sales. And that person did a startup in Pune and failed this morning. And I had multiple discussions. And finally, I said, okay, you come and join us as the head of sales. And he said, I don't have all the qualifications that are looking for. Why are you picking me? I said, you did a startup, you failed. I mean, you know a lot more than anybody else will know. So that's the only reason I made an offer. I'm worried he'll start applying somewhere and some HR person attending the session will grab him and pay him more money.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, lovely. Vijay, any views on this in terms of your advice to HR and your advice to founders, startup, young people who want to go back to corporate?
Yeah, I think I fully agree with Vaiti that HR, the corporates should actually welcome the startups founders who have failed for whatever reasons. Because firstly, they have a great exposure to the entire whole process of how to bring something in the market, idea or a innovation, to convert that into a market. And even those can help them in entrepreneurship, if not entrepreneurship. They can help the corporates to or industry or organizations to create entrepreneurs internally. Okay. And they can have their ideas to new innovations and ideas to bring in the market. And these kind of people, the startup founders, even if they have failed, can be a great people to take it forward. I think HR should welcome that. And on the founders, I think some of the founders we have been telling them is if they can pivot. I think pivoting is not a bad idea. And we have a few startups who have pivoted their ideas in this COVID situation also to different scenarios or different things. And surrounding their whatever there was original idea, if they can pivot for a time being for next 1 or 2 years and then come back to their idea, that also is a possible solution that they can think.
Sure.
And some
Yeah.
of them have looked at that aspect also.
Sure. A question to both of you, and I'll start with you, stick with you, Vijay. Is
Yeah.
going, taking a job, my startup has failed, so I take up a job with another startup. Is that an option?
I think in my view, there is something called passion, and the startup founder has a passion for his idea, his innovation, his thing to be taken forward. That as it's as an option, yes, it is possible. But again, a founder would like to always be on his own kind of a thing. That's what the founder is, and wants to control and wants to take his things forward.
True,
So even if they join some other startup, it's as good as they are working for some other founder.
Yeah, true.
Okay. If they
True.
join as a partner, and they know each
That's
other
different,
well,
of
and
course.
then it's
Yeah.
a different thing. But that is a
Sure.
possibility. That is possible.
Yeah. Vaiti, your views, because we have I know very closely a startup founder, and he actively searches for people like you mentioned who have failed in the startups, because he believes that there is so much to learn and so much for them to contribute, and they are already in a startup mode, so they'll be very comfortably fitting in the startup culture that he has. What are your views? Is that a viable option for both the employer as well as the employee?
Yes, I think it is a good option. The only caveat that I would build is typically when a founder and entrepreneur works on a few years on his or her startup and then she fails, it also depends on the financial situation. Sometimes, if you have spent a lot of time and money and you lost a lot of money, it may not be practical for her to go back and work in another startup where it's unlikely that you will recover a lot of the money that you lost. Sometimes you simply want to put your financial systems back in order, in which case you may have no choice but to go to a corporate. Assuming that issue is not there, it really doesn't matter. You can go and work anywhere where you're excited by the assignment. I have a feeling in most cases, people who want to come out probably go and look for a corporate because they're tired of the ecosystem, the way it works. They want a break from the startup. It's like, you're playing cricket and football for long periods and then you go on a vacation because you don't want to think about the game. You don't want to think about the startup. So best just to go for a corporate. You forget the startup for a while, for at least 2-3 years. And the good thing is you earn some money back.
Yeah.
And then you maybe use that money and go back to another startup. So I think while working either for a startup or a corporate is the same, I think practically you'll end up working more for the corporate than a startup.
Okay. Interesting. I know we are short of time, so maybe one last question, Vaiti, to you is that you mentioned about these the goods and the bads in terms of the ecosystem kind of thing. So and while it's good to say that look, you need to make you need to make money from your core business. As a startup founder, I have too much peer pressure of he got seed A, he got seed B, I'm still bootstrapped. So how do I cope with this peer pressure of funding and valuation that everybody gets sucked into, and perhaps lose focus in terms of making money from my core business?
I think it's difficult. And the only advice I have for entrepreneurs is to put out the noise, right? And it's like, the cricketers who play big games for India and other you're playing in front of a stadium of 100,000 people screaming. If you ask people, big successful cricketers, and say, how do you keep the noise out? Which is essentially what you're asking. There's so much of noise around.
Yeah.
Someone like Virat Kohli, he will tell you, look, when I walk in, I am focused on the ball. I'm not thinking of the noise. And it's not easy. It's easy to say it, but it's very difficult to do it. That requires skill and practice and discipline and all that. That's what you have to do. You have to stop reading the newspapers every day and say, he got Series A, she got this and all that, and say, look, can I build my business? And that's what you need to do. So it's not easy. It's tough.
Sure. Okay. Maybe if we still have a couple of minutes, some questions that have come up from the audience. Question to both of you. Are you seeing more innovations in the service space in India rather than the product space? Maybe Vijay, you can first have your say and then come back to Vaiti.
Yeah, I agree with that insight or observation. A lot of startup that we get, we find they are in the service space. One of the reason being, I think, in the product space, the investment seems to be pretty high. For if you are developing, manufacturing a product, or if you are even if you are building a enterprise level tool or software product, the investment is pretty high before you start seeing the value out of it or this thing. And whereas in a service space, you can start realizing your investment very easily.
Okay, I think we've lost Vijay. Vaiti,
Yeah, looks like
maybe
that. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
maybe
let me answer this.
yeah.
Hello, am I
So,
there?
yeah, please continue.
Yeah, Vijay, tell me.
Yeah, sorry. What I was saying was, product scenario that investment is upfront very high. In a services, you can realize your investment much faster. So that's why we are seeing a lot of this thing. And also, if you look at it, the VCs and venture capitalists are able to fund more of the service companies today, startups today. And that's why there is a much more liking for service startups.
Okay, Vaiti, your say?
Well, typically, if you look at how nations evolve, most countries evolve by being uh, first an agriculture-based economy, and then move to a manufacturing-based economy, and then the truly evolved economies move to service-based economy. That's what is happening with India. So it's all services now. We finished the agriculture, we product, and I don't think we had a great product success. I mean, as a nation, I don't think we were very successful.
Yeah.
We will quickly move to services. So therefore, that's one reason why you're seeing more service.
Sure.
Second, like Vijay just said, investments required to build products, and consequently, a brand is very high,
Sure.
and the chances of failing in a product is very high. Services are easy, and the other thing that Vijay mentioned, pivot. In case you want to fail fast and pivot, a service allows you to do that. So you build a platform to do X, but it's
Sure.
not working. You can use the same platform with some tweaks and do Y.
Yeah.
But I'm building a product here, right? We're building a beverage. So
Sure.
I can't just pivot and say, okay, building a beverage not working, can I convert it to food, right? It's a totally different business.
True.
Time required for development and research is very high. It's talking years.
Absolutely.
Services are months. That's the reason.
Gestation time is longer. Yeah.
Much longer.
Sure. One more interesting question, and again, I just earlier in the afternoon we were in Thai Pune having a session, and somebody mentioned that the definition of a startup that has to be a temporary kind of phenomenon. And the question here from Ashok Kumar Group is that, and I think he's taken reference of Gopal Krishnan's latest book, that when should startups be grown-ups?
Can you repeat that, Advait?
When should startups start behaving like grown-ups? That's the question.
Okay.
If I paraphrase that. So Vaiti, you want to go first?
Sure, I can go first. So incidentally, if somebody is reading Gopal Krishnan's book, you should have written the blurb for the book. So
yes, I know.
I think the way to treat a startup as a grown-up is when, so there's a valley of death that most startups go through, which is, let's say, the first 5 years.
Yeah.
If you have succeeded in the first 5 years, there's a reasonable chance that you will make it. You may not be a huge unicorn, but you'll continue being there. So in my view, 5 years is a good time. Before that, you're certainly a startup. And if you're a product development company like we are, maybe you add 2 more and make it 7 years. Anything below that is definitely a startup.
Sure.
From the 7 years to the 15 years, depending on what kind of business. So suppose you're in the space launching business, you're probably a startup for 15 years, right?
Yeah.
But if you're launching an e-commerce company, you can't be a startup for more than 7 years, right?
Yeah.
So I think it determines on the type of business and the amount of time you spend.
Sure.
The other metric is also the number of people you've hired. If a company is hired, let's say 500 or 1,000 people, then we can have some number. you can no longer be a startup. I mean, I still see startups which are 15 years old, have done $1 billion fundraise, have 10,000 people and call them startups. They're not.
Yeah, true. So in a way, it's very similar to the Government of India official definition of 5 years as a startup. So
Correct. Absolutely.
yeah, fair enough. Yeah, Vijay, last words.
Yeah, same thing. I think I agree. As per Government of India, it's now they have moved it from 7 years to 10 years.
Okay.
So, okay, but I think 5 to 7 years is the right time for a startup to. One can say they are kind of matured startup, and they are there to they can sustain themselves.
Okay, great. Excellent. So I think we've just about exceeded our time. So like I mentioned, we have been greatly supported by National HRD Network and NHRDN Pune. So can I request NHRDN Pune Vice President Aman Rajavali, you're here. You can switch on your camera, and a new look Aman also here. Welcome, Aman. I know you were running another program for NHRDN, so you joined late. So thank you for joining in, and welcome here.
Thank you so much. Yes, my apologies, and I have missed an amazing session. Could not join here, but thank you so much, Advait. As always, your sessions, you organize these, and I don't know, I words fail me this time. Vaitheswaranji, the father of e-commerce, I miss listening to you, but जितना भी समय मैं यहाँ पे था बहुत अच्छा था. This good learning experience. विजय साहब, आपसे बहुत दिनों बाद मुलाकात हो रही है. भाव इंस्टीट्यूट तो हम आते रहते थे. Thanks to Advait, and amazing place. So I'm now getting a opportunity to personally thank you for the amazing infrastructure that you have there. Yeah. And all the participants on behalf of National HRD Network and our partner Upohan, I thank all of you to have joined in. And I see a lot of known people from the HR fraternity. I'm sure you have enjoyed this session. Thank you so much once again. Over to you, Advait ji.
Yes, thank you, Aman, and thanks again, Vaiti and Vijay, for sparing time and sharing huge experience and anecdotes and insights into the world of entrepreneurship, startups, and of course, incubation. Thank you once again for joining the Between the Lines session. And thanks for everybody who stayed back on a Friday evening to attend these online sessions. We'll be back next month. Again, it's a very interesting topic on HR next practices. And we'll have Aman and company to be our partners as well. So look forward to all of you. Next date for our Between the Lines session number 59 is going to be HR next practices is going to be in 20th of August. So thank you so much. Thanks Vaiti again. Thanks Vijay. And thanks NHRDN Pune and TiE Pune for supporting us this week. Take care. Stay safe.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Advait, for having me here. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Bye.
It's the 59th session, is it, Advait?
Yes.
Wow.
58 today. So hopefully 59th, otherwise 60th next time. Thank you.
My God. It seems as if we just started off. Wow. Great journey.
All thanks to you, Aman. So.
Thank you,
Advait. Thank you, Advait.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.